And she said I made a damn fool of myself, and the whole camp knows it.
General Torgeson at Logistics and Support, sir.
For years, Gary Burghoff was the face of Radar O'Reilly, the soft-spoken company clerk who became one of the most loved characters on MASH. To many viewers, he seemed gentle, funny, and easy to understand. But behind that familiar face was a man dealing with pressure, family struggles, and the weight of playing a character people never forgot. Gary's life was shaped by talent, ambition, and hard choices, and his time on MASH held more meaning than most fans ever noticed. From the way he helped shape Radar to the real reasons he stepped away, his story reveals a side of the show that feels very different once you know it. Join us as we look back at Gary Burghoff's life and uncover what fans never noticed in MASH. Before fame found Gary Burghoff. Before most people knew Gary Burghoff as Radar O'Reilly, he already had a life shaped by talent, hard work, and a few challenges that could have stopped someone else. He was born Gary Rich Burghoff on May 24, 1943, in Bristol, Connecticut. Later, his family moved to Clinton, Connecticut, and then to Delavan, Wisconsin. From early on, acting was not some random path he stumbled into. It was something he truly wanted. Gary once said, "I spent all those Saturday matinees in the movie theaters. I probably saw every B film and every A film that was ever made." That says a lot about who he was, even as a kid. He was watching, learning, and dreaming long before fame ever found him. He also studied tap dance and became a drummer, which makes his story even more striking when you remember that he was born with brachydactyly caused by Poland syndrome, a condition that made 3 fingers on his left hand much smaller than those on his right. Even with that, he kept going. He built his skills instead of letting that define him. He got early acting experience with the Belfry Players in Williams Bay, Wisconsin, and later trained at HB Studio in New York City. And Gary was not just drawn to performance. He also had real talent as an artist. In 1961, he won the Hallmark Award for his painting Men of Jazz. He loved jazz so much that he did not just paint it, he lived it. In the 1960s, he played in a New York City jazz trio he founded called the We Three. So before MASH ever entered the picture, Gary was already building a life full of creativity. But the next part of his story is where those gifts started turning into something much bigger. From Charlie Brown to the edge of Hollywood. Gary's career began taking shape in a serious way in 1967, when he played Charlie Brown in the original off-Broadway production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. That role helped put him on the map and showed that he could bring warmth and heart to a character in a way people remembered. Not long after that, in 1968, he was also playing drums in a band called The Relatives. One of the singers in that band was Linda Carter, who would later become a huge television star. The group performed at the Sahara Hotel and Casino Lounge in Las Vegas for 3 months, which gave Gary another kind of stage and another kind of audience. He and Carter stayed friends, and years later, they even appeared together in a 1978 episode of The New Adventures of Wonder Woman called The Man Who Wouldn't Tell. That detail may seem small, but it shows how many different corners of entertainment Gary moved through before and after his biggest role. Around this same period, Gary was also trying to find his place in Hollywood and figure out who he was. He admitted that process was not easy. He said, "I used to be like so many kids. I wore my hair long and dressed funny and tried to blame the establishment for all the world's ills, my own included. Then one day I realized I was the only one who could change my own situation." That line feels honest, and it gives a clearer picture of the man behind the familiar face. He was not born confident. He had to grow into himself. After meeting director Robert Altman, Gary got the chance that changed everything. Altman chose him for the 1970 feature film MASH. That became Gary's feature film debut, and it opened the door to the role that would define his career. But what makes this even more interesting is that Gary did not just play Radar once. Out of everyone in the original film, he was the only actor who stayed on as a regular in the television series. And that is where a deeper part of the story begins. How Gary quietly changed Radar. When Gary moved from the 1970 film into the television version of MASH, he was playing the same character, but not in the same way. This is one of the most important parts of his story, because it shows that Radar did not become beloved by accident. Gary shaped him very carefully. He explained that in the original film, he created Radar as a lone, darker, and somewhat sardonic character, even calling him kind of a shadowy figure. But once the TV show began, he realized the tone was changing. The other characters were becoming sophisticated, educated doctors and nurses who understood exactly how terrible war was, and often reacted to it with sarcasm, frustration, or judgment. Gary saw that Radar needed to be something different. With Larry Gelbart's help, he slowly turned Radar into a more innocent and naive character. That contrast mattered. While the others talked about the shame and madness of war in a more intellectual way, Radar reacted from a place of pure innocence. That is a huge reason the character stood out. He was not dumb, and he was not there just to be cute. Gary gave Radar a different tone from the people around him. While the others often reacted with sarcasm or frustration, Radar reacted more simply and more openly. That difference made him stand out right away. That softer version of Radar is the one viewers connected with, and Gary understood exactly why. In a 1973 interview, he said, "It's not enough to recite funny lines, to go through the motions. You have to make contact. To me, that's what acting is all about." That may be one of the clearest windows into what he thought his job really was. He was not just delivering a performance. He was trying to reach people. And he knew he had done that because fans told him so. He said people often came up to him in public and told him how much Radar meant to them. The connection felt real because Gary played him like a human being first. And once you see that, Radar starts to feel less like comic relief and more like the heart of the whole unit. What fans missed about Radar's place in MASH. One reason Radar stood out so much is that he was not like the others at the 4077th. He worked with the medical unit full-time, but he was not an officer. In fact, he was one of the only non-officers in MASH who had such a major role in the series. That alone made him different from most of the main cast. Around him were surgeons, commanders, head nurses, and other authority figures. Radar was younger, quieter, and often seen with small touches that made him seem gentle, like his teddy bear. He looked softer than the rest, especially next to characters like Colonel Potter or Father Mulcahy. But that softer image could make people miss what was really going on. Gary understood that a lot of viewers connected with Radar because he felt like the person stuck dealing with the system. As he put it, any guy who's been in the military relates. Radar is the only non-officer in the group, and when something needs to be done, he's the one who usually does it. Most people relate to that because it's like trying to deal with the system. Any system. That is such a smart way to look at the character. Radar was often underestimated, but he was also the one keeping things moving. He became confident in his place over time, and that growth helped make him more than just the sweet kid in camp. Gary even said he thought of himself as a pretty good teacher, and his goal was to offer a mirror to viewers so they could see themselves in him. That idea says a lot. He was not chasing glamour. He wanted recognition, yes, but more than that, he wanted people to feel seen. That may be why he hated being called cute, even though many people saw him that way. He wanted Radar to mean more than that. And on a show filled with sharp wit, pain, and emotional strain, Radar became the one character who could still make innocence feel powerful. But Gary was not just part of the cast. He was part of something much larger. And that larger story of MASH helps explain why his role mattered so much. The show around Radar was changing. MASH was not just another TV hit. It was a war comedy drama that aired on CBS from September 17, 1972 to February 28, 1983, and it followed the doctors and support staff of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital during the Korean War. The cast first included Alan Alda, Wayne Rogers, Larry Linville, Loretta Swit, McLean Stevenson, Gary Burghoff, Jamie Farr, and William Christopher. Over time, several cast members changed, and after Gary left, Klinger moved into the company clerk role. The show became one of the most famous and highly rated series in U.S. television history, and many people still see it as one of the greatest of all time. Part of what made it stand out was its tone. It could be funny, sad, silly, and painful, all in the same run. Early on, while the Vietnam War was still going on, the series had to walk a very careful line. It reflected on war, questioned it, and even mocked parts of it, but it did so under the cover of comedy. As the years passed, the writing changed. The show slowly shifted from being mostly comedy with serious moments to more of a drama with some comedy still left in it. After co-creator Larry Gelbart left after Season 4, and producer Gene Reynolds left after Season 5, that change became even clearer. The end of the Vietnam War in 1975 also changed the stories. They became less political and more focused on character. Some episodes even broke the normal sitcom style completely, like one shown through the eyes of a wounded soldier, one built around dreams, one spread across a full year, and one told in real time. Producers also did serious research, including talking to real MASH surgeons and staff. So many stories were rooted in real wartime experiences. Even the set had its own behind-the-scenes story. The 4077th was built across two separate sets, an outdoor location in the mountains near Malibu for most exterior and tent scenes, and an indoor set on Stage 9 at Fox Studios in Century City for interior scenes. Later, some outdoor scenes were even filmed inside after the set was changed. All of that gave MASH a look and feeling that stayed with viewers. But through all those shifts in tone, style, and cast, Gary Burghoff remained one of the faces people remembered most. Success on MASH and life off camera. By the time MASH became a major success, Gary Burghoff had become one of its most loved cast members. He earned 6 Emmy nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series and one in 1977. He was not there to accept it himself, so Alan Alda accepted the award for him. That moment alone shows how important Gary had become to the show. Beyond MASH, he was also known for being a regular on Match Game from 1974 to 1979, appearing in 204 episodes while standing in for Charles Nelson Riley, who was working in New York on a Broadway play. He continued making recurring appearances later too, which kept him in front of audiences even outside the 4077th. In his personal life, Gary married Janet Gale in 1971, and the two later had one daughter. That detail is simple, but it matters because it reminds us that while audiences knew him as Radar, he was also building a life away from the cameras. What stands out most when you look at all of this together is how much Gary's work was tied to who he was. He wanted to connect. He wanted people to see something of themselves in the characters he played. He once said, "You have to make contact." And that may explain why fans held on to Radar for so long. The role worked because Gary gave it honesty, restraint, and feeling. He did not turn Radar into a loud joke or a one-note innocent. He gave him quiet strength in a world full of bigger personalities. But while Radar was becoming one of the emotional anchors of MASH, Gary himself was quietly reaching a breaking point behind the scenes. The moment Gary knew it was time. When Gary Burghoff left MASH in 1979, after Season 7, a lot of fans were confused. Radar was one of the most loved people on the show, so his exit felt huge. But Gary later made it clear that his reason was deeply personal. He said, "Family, to me, became the most important thing. I was not available as a father because of my work." He also explained that the pressure did not end when filming stopped. Even simple family time could turn into public attention. In his words, whenever you go out as a family, you're always torn from family to deal with public recognition. For Gary, that became too much. He also spoke openly about burnout. In the complete book of MASH, he described how that kind of exhaustion can slowly take over a person. He wrote, "The harder you work, the less you accomplish, so more panic sets in and you spiral downward to burnout, a nearly total depletion of your vital energies." That was not a man talking about one bad week. That was someone describing a long struggle. Years later, he explained it another way. He said his life at that time was a beautiful picture that was all crooked, and he needed to step back in a big way to grow as a human being. He also pointed out that he did not exactly storm off the show. His contract had ended after 7 years, and he simply chose not to renegotiate. That choice changed the shape of MASH, but at the time, it mostly left people asking the same question. Why would one of the show's most loved actors walk away? The answer was bigger than one reason, and it becomes clearer when you look at everything he was carrying in him. The goodbye that had to be done twice. Even though Gary left after the 7th season, that was not the end of Radar right away. He came back in the following season to film the special 2-part farewell, Goodbye Radar. That episode was originally meant to be the final episode of Season 7, but CBS wanted more impact and had it expanded into a double episode for the next season's November sweeps. So in a way, Gary had to say goodbye twice. And filming that farewell was harder than many people knew. In the 2023 special MASH, the comedy that changed television, Gary looked back on that final scene and admitted he had wanted to go all the way emotionally. He said to himself, "What a wonderful moment. I can cry my eyes out, and I can do this wonderful dramatic moment. I can just completely fall apart." But the director told him to fight the tears instead. Gary wanted to do it his own way, and the scene was filmed like that. Then he saw the footage the next day and immediately knew something was wrong. He said, "The director was right, I was wrong." So he asked for a reshoot, and the director agreed. That detail says a lot. It shows that Gary cared deeply about getting Radar's final moment right. It also shows how personal that scene may have been for him. By his own account, he had spent years feeling unavailable to his children because of the show. So when Radar was leaving the 4077th, Gary may also have been feeling the weight of his own life, his own trade-offs, and his own regrets. That is what gives the farewell its extra pull. It was not just a character walking away. It was also a man trying to find himself again. And behind that emotional goodbye was another truth that becomes clearer with time. Gary leaving was not just about one decision. It was about many pressures meeting at once. Why Gary reached a breaking point. Burnout was a huge part of it, but it was not the whole story. Director Charles S. Dubin later said Gary was dealing with several pressures at once: problems in his marriage, stress in his personal life, and a growing sense that playing Radar was no longer giving him what he needed. Put together, those pressures help explain why he reached a breaking point. Fame had given him a beloved role, but it had also boxed him in. People strongly connected Gary to Radar, and that could be hard to live with. In an interview with the Television Academy, Gary said, "Audiences think you have to be the person they see on screen. The truth is, Radar was a better person than I'll ever be, and trying to live up to him was hard." That line is one of the most revealing things he ever said. Fans saw Radar as gentle, pure, and kind. But for Gary, carrying that image in real life became heavy. He also said, "It wasn't about fame for me. It never was. I had to make a choice that allowed me to be the kind of father and husband I wanted to be, and I'll never regret that." That explains his exit more clearly than any rumor ever could. He was not leaving because he had stopped caring. He was leaving because he cared about something else more. From the outside, his choice may have looked surprising. From his side, it sounded necessary. Fans often expect stars to hold on forever if the role is successful. Gary did the opposite. He let go of one of television's most famous characters because his personal life was calling louder. And once Radar was gone, the show itself started to feel different too. What MASH lost when Radar left. Gary's departure was not just emotional, it changed the balance of MASH in a very real way. The later years of the show leaned more heavily into drama, and cast changes were a big reason for that. McLean Stevenson, Larry Linville, and Gary Burghoff had all brought strong physical and verbal comedy to the series. When they were gone, that lighter energy faded. Wayne Rogers had already left earlier, and his replacement, Mike Farrell as B.J. Honeycutt, gave Hawkeye a more mature kind of friendship. Margaret also became softer over time, and less of a sharp comic foil. Then, after Klinger took over Radar's responsibilities, he stopped much of the cross-dressing and the wild attempts to get a Section 8 discharge. In other words, once Radar left, one of the show's most unique emotional notes went with him. Alan Alda often called Gary the emotional compass of the show. That description fits. Radar was not just the company clerk. He brought a kind of balance that the later version of the show had less of. Once he was gone, that change became easier to feel. Mike Farrell later said, "Gary Burghoff may well have been the best actor in the company." He praised Gary's focus and his gift for finding those little gems of behavior that made everything absolutely true. That is a powerful compliment, especially coming from a co-star who saw him work up close. Jamie Farr also said in a 2024 article, "I told Gary his leaving might be bad for the show and bad for him, but I couldn't talk him out of it." So the people around him understood that his exit carried weight. It was not just a cast change, it was the loss of a very specific kind of heart. The war on MASH did not get louder after Radar left. In some ways, it got lonelier. And that leads to another part of the story fans still debate: how the cast really felt about Gary himself. The rumors around Gary and the truth. Over the years, there has been a lot of talk about Gary being difficult to work with. Some stories claimed that the cast loved Radar, but not always Gary. One TV Guide essay even described the feelings around his departure that way, and there were reports of clashes behind the scenes. McLean Stevenson once said he had a love-hate relationship with Gary. At the same time, Stevenson also called him a brilliant actor and admitted that sometimes his own ego was part of the problem. There were also stories about arguments on set and moments of real tension. So yes, It seems fair to say that not everything behind the scenes was smooth. But that is not the whole story, and it is not the part that lasted. Gary later said, "My memories of MASH are now nothing but the fondest, and I still am in touch with my fellow cast members. Alan wrote me a letter right after I left the show, and there were no hard feelings. That matters. It shows that whatever rough patches existed did not define the whole relationship." Later signs pointed in the same direction. In the 2019 MASH reunion on Alan Alda's Clear and Vivid podcast, the warmth between the cast was easy to hear. In 2022, Alan sent Gary a birthday message that said, "Happy birthday, Gary. The world sends you love." Then he added, "Me too." Loretta Swit also spoke kindly about him, saying, "I have memories with Gary that are so joyous and so funny." She even said she missed him more often, but that he refused to fly, which made gathering harder. All of that paints a fuller picture. Maybe Gary could be intense. Maybe he could be hard to read at times. But the long view suggests something softer. Time did not leave the cast bitter. It left them affectionate. And that fits Gary's later life more than the old rumors ever did. Gary chose a different path. After leaving MASH, Gary did not disappear right away, but he also did not chase stardom the way some people expected. He kept working on television and appeared on game shows like Match Game, Tattletales, Liars Club, Hollywood Squares, and Show-Offs. He appeared in the film B.S. I Love You, and he showed up once each on The Love Boat and Ellery Queen. Radar also returned for 2 first-season episodes of After MASH, and then the character was spun off into Walter, though that only aired once in the Eastern and Central time zones. In the 1980s, Gary also became a TV spokesman for BP Gasoline and IBM Computers. In 2000, he worked as a spokesman for the .com auction site PriceRadar.com. But the more surprising parts of his post-MASH life were the things far away from Hollywood. He was a self-taught wildlife painter. He was qualified to handle injured wildlife in California. He opened a wildlife sanctuary and animal rehabilitation clinic in his own backyard, which helped earn him the nickname the Birdman of Malibu. He was also a strong environmentalist and supported the federal duck stamp program, helping preserve millions of acres of land. On top of that, he kept one of his oldest passions alive: music. He had been a professional jazz drummer, and on MASH, when Radar played drums in episodes like Showtime, Bulletin Board, and Dear Dad, again, that was really Gary playing. The music was not overdubbed. He also turned his creativity in another direction and became an inventor, earning patents for fishing-related products, a toilet seat lifting handle, and a new kind of fishing pole. He was even a stamp collector and helped select a postal stamp for United States hunters in 1993. Later, he came out of retirement in 2010 to appear in the film Daniel's Lot. So while some people saw his exit from MASH as the end of something, Gary seems to have seen it as a chance to live more freely. And the personal side of that freedom showed up in his home life too. The private life he protected. Gary's personal life kept moving after MASH as well. In 1985, he married Elizabeth Bostrom, and they had 2 sons together before divorcing in 2005. One thing people noticed about Gary later in life was how differently he chose to live. He even traveled only in his RV. It took longer than flying, but that was the life he preferred. He once said, "I try only to travel with my family." It was another sign that he had moved away from the pace and pressure that came with television fame. He also stayed away from the spotlight more and more. He does not post on social media. He is not out chasing attention on red carpets or in flashy interviews. but he has still used his fame when it mattered. A few years ago, working with his grown children, he appeared in a YouTube video supporting people affected by the California wildfires and spoke about a GoFundMe page that helped raise over $16,000. That sounds very much in line with the Gary people came to understand later. Private, but not uncaring. In recent years, fans who have met him at conventions have described him as humble, gracious, and deeply moved that people still remember him. And every May 24th on his birthday, fans flood the internet with messages thanking Radar for caring when the world forgot to. By 2025, Gary Burghoff was said to be living far from the noise of fame in quiet retirement. He gave the world warmth, then stepped away and chose peace. For a man forever linked to one of television's gentlest characters, that choice says a lot about who Gary really was. What moment from Gary Burghoff's time on MASH made you see Radar differently? And do you think leaving the show when he did was the right decision for him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.